Well, hello again, and welcome to another of the Red Shadow's favorite games. And today, I am going back a little bit further in my favorite consoles to the PlayStation 1, original PlayStation, Sony PlayStation, whatever you care to call it. But this is one of my favorite PS1 games, one of my favorite PS1 RPGs, and one of my favorite RPGs of all time. The game that I'm talking about starts with Legend of, and a lot of people might think Dragoon, but actually this is Legend of Legaia. See if you can see it there with more of the glare. Yeehaw. There's Vaughn, Gala, and Noah. Not sure you can see much from the back of it. This is my strategy guide for it that I got a couple years ago. Really nice shape, primo strategy guide. And then just because, I have it so I can show it off, this is Legaia 2, which was a sequel that came out on the PlayStation 2, Legaia 2 Dual Saga. I've played a little bit of this game, but not much beyond kind of like the beginning area. And it's like a lot of other role-playing games, even though it's a sequel, it doesn't have much to do with the original, despite the fact that the main character of this game, I think his name is Lang, hopefully, because that's the name that's on the back of the case. He looks a lot like Vaughn from this game. Kind of have somewhat similar hairstyles, and even their look on their face is similar, but two different people. But this game I've played many times, and this game, unlike some of the other games on my list here of favorite titles, I've beat this game a handful of times. This could best be summed as just another RPG. If there's any other people out there watching this who love this game, they might take offense to that. I'm not really good about expressing why this might set itself apart from other games, other than its fighting system or its combat system, which I'll get to in a minute. But I played a lot of RPGs back on the PS1, and a lot of RPGs for the PS2. And this is, in a lot of ways, just another RPG. But what really sets an RPG apart for me is not its visual look, it's not its fighting style or its combat system. It's the story. Story. You will find that with so many of my favorite games. A lot of them are just simply because they had a great story, even if the gameplay wasn't spectacular. I guess I should mention on this the gameplay. The combat system for this was unique in that instead of having kind of like a standard turn-based where you hit with a sword or cast a spell, this one was done with basically, it looks like a fighting game. They pose in a battle stance, and you select kind of like high, mid, or low range attacks, and if you input those attacks in certain ways, you get combos, like if you're in a fighting game. And then when the battle starts, that's what they do. It looks like a throwdown in a game like a Mortal Kombat or a Street Fighter or something. So that was cool, but it didn't really matter to me. I just usually just bopped through the buttons and did everything I could to just get through the battles, because I wanted the story. I wanted to get to the meat of the story and these characters. That's what I love about Legend of Legaia so much, is its story. It takes place in a world where pretty much the entire world is infested with this mist that causes creatures and humans and whatnot to turn into beasts and, go on murderous rampages and lose their minds, and, there's no saving them, unfortunately, for the people living in this world until the adventure begins. If a beast attacks, they have to kill him, and that means they may have just killed somebody they knew, or, killed a human being who'd been turned into a creature due to this mist. And of course, as all things do, you get introduced to your character and something happens and they realize, oh, I can save the world. So this story follows Vaughn as he goes out to revive the I can't remember off the top of my hand what they're referred to, but there are these trees that once the trees are revitalized, their touch extends out so far and clears the mist out and causes a lot of people to stop being creatures and stop killing everything, and life can kind of resume in those areas of the map. So you travel from town to town, find the tree. I'm guessing it must be the Saru tree. I feel really stupid right now. Genesis trees. Okay. It's the Genesis trees. And also something else I guess I've neglected to mention. You can't really see it all that great, but Vaughn has this thing on his hand that it's some sort of a being called the Ra Saru, and then there are also Saru itself without the Ra prefix. But those have to do with, one, some of the creatures that cause people to turn into beasts once they are infected by this mist, but also our characters in the game here kind of merge with these Ra Saru creatures, and they help to power them in certain ways to help them on their journey. And it's the Saru or the Ra Saru, whichever one, that basically, with contact with the Genesis trees, can revitalize them and cause the mist to be driven away. And that's your journey. You play as him. He meets the lady Noah shortly thereafter, and then a little while after that, this warrior monk named Gala, and they form their party. RPGs in the PS1 game era, for the most part, seemed like they would have like a 3 to maybe 4 person party, and nothing more or less. So this is the part in these videos where it's really hard to just explain to you exactly why I love this so much, but this story just really gets to me. These characters, I grow to love all of them. There's humor and wit in all of these RPGs, and this one is no exception. And there's so many, interactions and experiences that these characters have throughout the game that you just cannot help but feel invested in their story. And by the end, you're ready to see what happens and how they save their world and their relationships with one another. And this is one that it doesn't. I don't think I've brought this up before, but when I played The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past for the first time years ago, and I got to the end of the game, and during the credits, they kind of scrolled through a bunch of the areas that Link had been to and a lot of the characters he had come to meet and interact with, and just kind of showed ever so briefly, the effects that he had on the world after he had saved the world. And this game doesn't give you that kind of an experience, but I always wanted with games like this, a lot of the PS1 RPGs and the Super Nintendo RPGs that I'd played, I'd always wanted them to let you go after the game was over and go back and visit all the cities and all the people you'd seen before and get new dialogue options, and just kind of expand the story a little bit. But it does have a nice ending. If I recall right, at the end, you get ready to go out to the world and basically do just that. So I like the fact that they at least took it to that extent. It's too bad they just didn't invest a little bit more time into letting you do it yourself. But Legend of Legaia, it's one of my top 5 PS1 RPGs. All of the other 4 in that top 5 will be covered in this series, but I decided it was just time to start getting into those here. Legend of Legaia, it's really, really good. I think it's a really overlooked RPG from the PS1. Most people will think about Legend of Dragoon. They'll think about the Final Fantasy games, Xenogears. They'll think of the Suikoden games, if I'm pronouncing that right. They'll think about like Wild Arms. the Mana games. I'm sure I'm probably overlooking a bunch of other good RPGs, but I haven't played most of those. This group of 5 that I'll be covering from the PS1 are some of my favorite games ever, and they're the backbone of what made the PS1 my most memorable, my most favorite console, and why the 90s were, for me, the best time in gaming for this guy right here. So, well, that about wraps it up for this. Legend of Legaia PS1 RPG. These don't tend to be as expensive as some of those other titles on eBay, so it's probably a good time as any to pick something up like this and give it a look. But it's Legend of Legaia PlayStation, one of my favorite games. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.